Hey guys, welcome to the stream. We got Charlie Chu here from Oni Press. He is ex-editorial now, but was in editorial for a long, long time. He's very tiny up there in the corner, up there. So, Charlie, what's your job position now? Now that you're out of editorial,
I have no idea. I have
you're
the
still
longest.
you're
I
still
have,
with Oni though.
yes, no. I am still. I have the longest job title at Oni. It is now technically supposed to be vice president of creative and business development,
Okay.
which is a hilariously self-aggrandizing sounding thing that makes me feel super awkward every time I talk about it. But basically, I am sort of the guy who's representing Oni's projects on like the film and TV side, like how we set up Heartthrob TV option with Studio 8 that got announced a couple of weeks ago, and also some small business development stuff, including like a board game imprint we announced back around Gen Con.
With the Dead of Winter stuff, right? Or no, that was the in the Scott Pilgrim card game.
Yeah, so like we packaged together a Scott Pilgrim card game. We started doing comics based on the universe of the Dead of Winter board games.
Yeah.
And then after that, we decided to do a board game imprint. The first of which will also be published by Renegade Game Studio next year. We're gonna have a small card game based on Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill, and then hopefully we're gonna have some other games based on Oni books coming up in the future as well.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so like in a weird way, like my job at Oni is like I'm still, as someone who was senior editor for like the last 7-8 years, I'm now sort of running point on figuring out ways of making money for our creator-owned titles and our creators in a way that goes outside of publishing.
Cool. So before we jump into pitching and just general pitching stuff, not even specifically to Oni, but just like what editors look for, I have a couple questions I like to ask people before we get going, and that is, do you remember the first comic book you bought?
Oh god, this is so specific. I remember like one of the weirdest random memories I have from my childhood is my mom and I were on a road trip, and I remember buying Web of Spider-Man, I want to say number 68.
Yeah.
At a gas station somewhere.
Do you remember who did that?
I don't. Now I want to totally look it up. But like, I remember it being a very weird issue of Spider-Man to read.
What year was this, do you think?
Oh, I don't remember.
Like,
now I'm scared.
Approximate. Is it 90s or is it 80s?
I want to say late 80s, early 90s maybe? No.
Yeah.
No, maybe it's not 68. I remember it involving Spider-Man fighting off these two brothers who were Hispanic werewolves.
Hispanic werewolves, the classic trope.
Now I gotta find this out.
So how did you get, as far as like getting a job in editorial, how did you, I consider that breaking into comics in like a very like different way, because you're still part of like the comics machine. You're still making comics, and we'll get into like what an editor does to make comics in a second. But like, how did you start doing editorial?
So I have a very weird entrance in the comics, but I also feel like it's not that weird in the generation of people who started working in comics. So like, I, like many other people currently working in comics, came out of like the Warren Ellis Forum.
Okay.
So when I was in my early 20s, I was interning for a movie company and sort of tracking comics and graphic novels in a time when, there was no Marvel giant universe of movies.
Right,
it was, it was less of the feeding frenzy it was, and people were still talking about comics like, oh, they're not taking it seriously. And
are they taking us seriously now? Is this what it's like to be taken seriously?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, everyone seems to be making money in comics other than people who make comics.
Yeah.
So at the time, I was sort of, working as an intern to sort of track comics and graphic novels for this, company that was looking for stuff that was non-superhero. So after sort of doing a weird deep dive into comics, because again, like I mentioned, like this random issue of like Web of Spider-Man in like 1989 was the first, real comic I'd ever kind of consumed. I didn't really fall in love with comics till like I was in college. And a lot of that was because I was working this job where I had to really start tracking everything. And so, you start looking at comics that are not superhero, and you end up looking at stuff by like, Warren Ellis, a lot of stuff that was coming out of Vertigo at the time. And so, after finding the stuff that Warren was doing, like he was specifically at like this weird peak of he had just launched Planetary. He had just started The Authority after coming off of rebooting.
Oh man, that was like huge back in the day.
It was like Stormwatch, Planetary. I think Transmit had just launched or was about to launch. So I, like many other people, ended up on Warren's message board on Delphi, and that's where like I kind of met a lot of other peers who work in comics now. Matt Fraction, Kelsey Connick, Kieran Gillen, and many, many, many others. So. Included in that bunch of people included folks like Jamie S. Rich and James Lucas Jones, who were working at Oni at the time.
Yeah.
And I met James like as he was just starting up at Oni. Flash forward a few years, like I'd known those guys forever. In the lead up to like 2010, the Scott Pilgrim movie was sort of about to come out, and Oni needed to staff up, and they had sort of offered up the possibility of me coming in to go work at Oni to start bringing in new projects.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was in LA working in the film business, juggling the possibility of working in like, low-level junior development person kind of jobs for producers. And it was kind of like, you can work in movies where it takes forever to get anything made, or you can go work in comic books where it doesn't feel like you're talking to a million people. Like you're dealing with writers and artists and then your editorial team and sort of going from there.
To be fair, comics moves at like a breakneck speed, and that comes with its own like, positives and negatives.
Yeah.
Because I feel like part of the reason why I wanted to do this stream is because I feel like there's no good resource. Like everybody who's working in some capacity out there in comics like has no time for anything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is
because it moves so quickly.
Comics is so physical labor intensive in a way that people don't really appreciate on the outside. Like I think readers and people who are aware of comics but aren't really that aware of the process of making comics have no idea how hard it is to make a living doing this. I mean, if you're a writer, you don't just get to write one book and then sort of live off of that.
Yeah.
It's like if you're a working writer in comics, even if you're working at Marvel and DC, you're probably doing like 5 books at a time or something. And if you're like an artist or a colorist like you are, it's like there's only so much that you can juggle, and it's very much like it's not a 9 to 5. People are probably working like 60 hours a week plus.
Yeah, the battle was like trying to figure out exactly how many balls I could keep in the air at the same time without like everything going off the rails. Like that was my 20s, was just panic and 24-hour days and like realizing that this was not sustainable. And trying to, settle everything down. But so would you say that like how you got into editorial was like kind of generally how it works? You come from a different editorial kind of background and just kind of segue in, or is it like when you talk to like people who work in comics, as far as the art side, everybody has like, oh well, I got in because this happened, and it's all different, and it's all like kind of dice roll, like in the right place at the right time with the skills to back it up. Is editorial the same kind of way?
No, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I've benefited from working at Oni as what is likely going to be my first and last job in comics in a way.
Oh yeah, you're like, you're scorching the bridge right now on stream.
I am that company dude, man. I am that guy. I mean, it's just, I think everyone has a weird path into comics. Some people come in from publishing. Some people come in, and look at editorial as though it's a stepping stone into becoming a writer in comics. Although, like, I think most of editorial, actually all of editorial at Oni kind of looks at that view very suspiciously. So I don't know. It's I don't have any sage wisdom on how to become an editor. Other than like I think like I came in with I knew a lot of people in comics because I was in the Warren Ellis forum and was kind of a loon.
Yeah.
But I think at the time, like I was someone who was, you hang around a message board and you talk about comics all day, people get a sense of what you're into and,
Sure.
how much you're into it.
Yeah.
So it was that thing where Oni was looking for someone who, like every editor at a creator who's working on the creator-owned side, it's like you get to be a tastemaker, you get to bring in your Rolodex and do all that stuff. And, despite being someone who at the time was working in Hollywood, I kind of checked off these marks that they were looking for. So I don't know. It's weird. Like people who are trying to break in, I feel like look at comics as though it's weirdly impenetrable in some way.
Yeah, for sure.
The reality is that, like, compared to every other entertainment industry, the veil that sort of splits between pros and amateurs is so thin.
Yeah, I always tell people that, like, if you want to break into comics, you just start making comics. And I don't know if that's like the best advice or the worst advice or whatever, but like my sense is like, if you just start making stuff and you don't stop, eventually somebody gives you the time of day.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's if you're part of stuff that's good, or you're talking to the right people, or you're just in the room having the conversation, that's, I think, more important than anything else. And how you get in there varies, person to person, right? So, like, people on the publishing side, like, companies like, like me at Oni or editorial at Oni, or like if you're an editor at Boom or Dark Horse and any other publishers, it's kind of, if you're a huge success in the webcomic side, but you haven't set up your print rights for publishing, guaranteed those people knocking on your door if there's an opportunity to work together. Sure. All of us in publishing are hustling. We're all trying to make money off doing stuff. We're all trying to figure out books that we think are cool.
Yeah.
And sort of, if you're putting work out there, that is the biggest indicator of whether or not you are going to be easy to deal with and can be professional or not.
Sure. So explain, okay, from my end, an editor, it feels like the editor's job is to kind of like herd cats, like get everybody on the same page, get everybody like making the book on time. But I'm also, as a colorist, like the last person in the chain, Yeah. So of course my experience is about, hitting deadlines and that kind of thing. How much does an editor get involved when it comes to, tweaking the writing or leaving notes on stuff like that? Does it vary from project to project, or?
Oh, it absolutely varies project to project. Again, my experience is all through the lens of working at Oni. Like things that make us unique on this side are, up until Dead of Winter, I'd never worked on a licensed project. So, my entire experience working at this company has been entirely on creator owned. So, this question that radically changes depending on which publisher you're working for. But like at Oni, it all varies. I mean, there are projects that you do where you're really intense on trying to give notes and trying to be there as support on the writing side, or like giving heavy notes on thumbnails and artwork. But then there are other projects where, like, you want to stay hands off and you want to create a creatively fertile environment for people to just be able to do stuff that they do.
If you were working with somebody who is new, would you be? Is there a general rule at Oni where like you would either be like more hands-on, or would it be just kind of like play it by ear, see what they're capable of?
Yeah, you're definitely playing it by ear. I mean, it is that thing where if you were emotionally invested as an editor in the project that you're working, and especially that you had a heavy hand in approving and sort of like firing through whatever publishing workflow to get a book approved is.
Yeah.
You are not going to let a book get published that is weak as much as you can help it.
Yeah.
So, like, when you have new projects with new creators who are less experienced, who are capable of greatness, but, like, the execution is not quite there, you try to, like, give as much feedback, and you try to establish a rapport and trust, on creative, so that, like, when you give a note, it's not like this imposition of, you need to change this thing. It's more of a conversation of, like, well, you're trying to introduce this character this way, which establishes this character in behaving this way, which is tied to this thematic in the concept of your book.
Yeah.
And it's like, good notes, whether it's working in comics or even like movies or TV, it comes down to asking really good questions and really digging down into figuring out what the intention of whatever story you're trying to tell is, or whatever character you're working on is. trying to say. So it's all case by case. There is no like standardized like you have to go through this checklist of stuff with every project or every creator.
Yeah.
You really just kind of know if like a project is working or not, and you really step in if it's clear that it's not quite working or there are things that aren't quite gelling.
Yeah.
But then like you work on other books where it's like, oh, this team knows what they're doing, or this creator like just kind of you're there to just sort of facilitate what they do and do best.
So let me ask you about pitches in general now, because we talked a little bit about in the last couple streams about how to put together a decent portfolio and like what you should and shouldn't put in there, how long it should be, the things that you should really sweat versus the things that everybody tells you about that people sweat that's really not that big of a deal, like general ins and outs of it. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about pitches, and I was like, as much of an authority as I am on portfolios, because I've been putting them together for like 15 years, I have like no idea what it comes to pitches. Like I've read some pitches from Cullen Bunn, but I don't know if Cullen is like trading on his name with these pitches. You know what I mean? Like, is there a typical pitch that comes at Oni at all? Like, or are they all wildly different?
I don't know. It's a funny question to ask because it depends on how cynical an editor will feel at Oni. It feels like we do get the same pitch over and over again, right? So, like,
literally the same pitch, because I've been sending in Pickle Rick pitches for every single day,
And it's like Oni right now feels probably a few too many. Like, there are these genres that people in comics, especially new writers and creators in comics, can't seem to get away from. So, like, everyone's got, like, their bending over backwards to try and take a superhero project into feeling like not really a superhero project.
Oh, no.
It's a superhero project. We also get the, light fantasy YA graphic novel, but not really interesting enough kind of project.
Yeah.
But wants kudos points for having progressive politics behind it.
Yeah.
It's just,
which I know Oni isn't like anti-progressive politics. You published Heartthrob, for example, has queer couples and it's very like liberal progressive, but you guys aren't looking to publish stuff that's like just that. You receive a lot of pitches that are like just that.
It's the problem we have is that people pitch those sort of projects, but it's kind of written hacky.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I'll give you a perfect example, right? So
yeah.
Something that's really core and important for us is that we're actively looking for more diversity-driven projects, right?
Yeah. I actually, to interrupt you for 1 second,
yeah.
I actually had somebody come up to me at a convention once and ask me, I have this pitch and it's like all done and I want to pitch it at Oni and I know they want diversity. Is Jewish diverse enough? And I was like, dude, I don't know. I was like, just pitch the book.
Yeah, but it's like, it depends. It depends. There is no...
Yeah, like, I don't know what your story is.
Yeah, so like, to give you an example, it's as an Asian American who works in comics,
yeah,
it's like I am constantly on the hunt for projects that have Asian characters. But the problem is that we'll get like a messed up version of it where it's a predominantly white creative team doing this thing about like a hot Asian girl who's a samurai, and she talks about being Asian all the time, and it's just no. Like when we're saying we're looking for diversity, we're looking for new voices that are doing genre fiction with a character cast that feels lived in and real and reflects the world around us.
Yeah.
So it's not about having like...
Have you ever like given a note in the early stages of a pitch and been like, this character would work better as a different ethnicity or anything like that? Like,
well, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. There is a project that you are going to end up coloring after Heartthrob Season 2 wraps, I think, where there was a conversation. This is a project that's unannounced, so I'm dancing around
sure
stuff here. But this was a project that at the outline stage, I had made a random suggestion about tweaking the ethnicity of the two characters, which were written, race neutral, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
and
I imagine like a lot of stuff gets written as just like, these are just people. They don't necessarily have to be, black, white, Asian, whatever,
Yeah, there's this, like, it's funny. This conversation is very much like at the front of my mind because I don't know if you saw, but Dan Harmon from Rick and Morty started up a new podcast with Jessica Gao, who was the writer on the Pickle Rick episode, right?
Yeah.
And they started a podcast that's talking about diversity in casting and writing called Whiting Wongs. And Jessica talks about writing in the Pickle Rick episode, there's a therapist by the name of Dr. Wong, who's explicitly meant to be Chinese in script. And in the process of going through casting, like, they ran out of time. They didn't find the right voice actor that could sort of fit what they were going for.
Sure.
And that role ended up going to Susan Sarandon.
Yeah.
Who was available and was ready to do like a guest spot for an episode. And it was that intersection of, you want to find the right person, but it's also, this is a get for casting and that sort of, right? But anyway, when they're talking about like this Dr. Wong character, what that is that like it's trying to, change a character that normally would be, race neutral, and by specifying it to be, Asian American, that means in the casting you are forced to make that casting decision, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, in comics, it's kind of the same thing, where it's like, most scripts are written with sort of race neutral for the most part.
Sure.
And so, like, I think something that people in comics are not aware of is that if you're writing characters in that way, you can choose to specify that in the background so that when they're illustrated and colored, that manifests in a way that feels more real to real life. Because, again, no minority walks around talking about being a minority in an explicit way life, unless it's, like a conversation they're literally having about that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, like, in sort of like trying to institute more diversity in our industry, in our medium, it's needing to have that stuff be less explicit, which somehow makes it more explicit. So it's also like having a character who's cool, who's written to be race neutral. If you're like, and this character is half Pakistani and, half white or something, suddenly you have to make creative decisions on the illustration side that reflect that. And then suddenly that character will have their own sort of, energy and space about it. Yeah. And suddenly, like, that feels much more lived in.
Yeah, for sure. So we kind of got off on a tangent. Is there a proper pitch that, like, is there like kind of a standardized? I mean, I'm not talking about like, what Oni looks for as far as like the content. I'm talking like, is there? Do you want like, a whole issue colored letter done with a one sheet of like, elevator pitch and a paragraph of what it's about? Like, would you just want the one sheet? Would you just want pages? Do you want a whole art team? Like, when you pitch a book, can the pitch just be from like straight from the writer and just have like not have an art team and kind of figure that out later? Does that happen a lot?
It does from time to time. Like, it's, again, these things are so unique. Like, every pitch is different. Like in editorial, I always tell people you want to get the idea across as quickly as possible. But more importantly, it's like the two sides of a pitch are very simple that you need to communicate. Number one, what the concept is, and number two, what the execution is, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people try to pitch comics as like, oh, it's this meets this. So it's like, a detective who somehow finds his way into a land of fantasy creatures, but he tries to find the murder of the princess or something, right? Which, on a concept, if you're a gatekeeper like an editor or someone who works in publishing, that gives you a sense of whether you're interested or not at a base conceptual level, and also gives you an idea of whether or not that idea competes with something else you're already publishing.
Sure.
And then the other side of it is that, like, in a pitch document, I want like that short pitch version, which is like usually like a sentence or two or like a short paragraph.
Yeah.
And then what I want after that is like a single page outline that is like, this is the execution of your actual story. So it shows that, oh, you know what your beginning, middle, and end of your narrative is and how long it's going to take to tell the whole thing.
I've left notes on pitches where people just ask me for my opinion, where they were like, well, I don't want to give too much away about the ending, like in the pitch. And I'm like, dude, it's the pitch. Just give away the ending. They want to know how it goes.
You are not hiding something. You are meant to be giving someone the idiot's guide blueprint version of what this book is supposed to be.
Yeah. The editorial's going to want to know the ending of your comic, you know?
Yeah. It's that most people who are new to pitching are either trying to fire stuff through in like a shotgun way. It's like, I have this idea because I really want to make a comic, so I'm gonna come up with something as quickly as possible and then send it out to every publisher.
Sure.
When like reality is that like the way to get an editor's attention is to make it feel as premeditated and as crafted as possible. So it's like, I want to do this project that I've thought about. So this is what my story is. This is the context with which I think this should be sold and marketed against all the other titles in comics. And then I've broken the story enough to know what the beginning to the end is and how much work it's going to entail. So it's being able to think about a thing that talks about creative, which is what makes your story special and unique, but also being able to talk about like, and this is how we're all going to make money off this thing because it's doing this kind of a book and it's really cool.
Yeah. So do you often, I mean, like, Oni's kind of a different beast because I feel like with, my DC Marvel projects, I get brought on real late in the process. Like, they get a writer, they get an artist, and then they get the colorist like at the very end. Is that what happens with Oni? Or because I know that a lot of people who pitch, especially if they're pitching for the first time, aren't going to pitch at DC and Marvel. They're not going to take a chance on somebody who doesn't have any published work. But like, you want to slant smaller press. You want to slant Oni and Black Mask and Boom and like all these kind of smaller companies compared to the big two. When you receive a pitch, have you ever gotten art and been like, we want this pitch but we don't want this artist? Have you ever broken teams up? Yeah.
We never force a divorce created. So if someone pitches with if you're a writer and you pitch with an artist and that artist is not good enough, and again, when I say not good enough, I mean like objectively in a, throwdown, Thunderdome competition in the direct market or online or like graphic novel sales. Yeah. If there's not a base level sort of competency that we perceive and publish on the publishing side, that will kill a pitch immediately, even if you have the greatest pitch document ever.
I mean, it'll like totally, like, you even if it's just like well written and you have terrible art from some other guy or girl or whatever, you won't be like, hey, we want to pick up this pitch but we want to attach a different artist. You won't like leave that note.
We will leave that. I mean, it's you will,
because I can imagine it's like a delicate situation.
It is a delicate situation. I'm also trying to think of a time when it's actually gone to that point, because it's never that clean. You know what I mean? Like, I think the person who will write like the greatest comics pitch ever is likely to have figured out that this book is great and will not have settled.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because if you're good enough to write a pitch that's that great, you will not be desperate enough to sort of like find an artist who's not there yet and not ready for prime time.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, like, if we were to run into that hypothetical situation, again, it depends on the nature of our relationship with, both sides of that team and sort of figuring it out from there.
When was the last time Oni had open submissions?
Oh, God. Is that 2014? Hang on, I'm looking it up.
It was that long ago?
I think it's one of those things where it feels that long ago to me.
Do you know what's long? Do you know like how many pitches you ended up getting?
I believe it was somewhere
like
just
ballpark?
Shy of 2,500.
2,500? That is a ton of pitches.
So when we did open submissions, we did it all through Submittable. We had a whole program to do it, right? And the way it worked was that it had to get a thumbs up or thumbs down from at least 2 of the editors.
Okay.
So, which is why like open submissions took a long ass time for all of us in editorial, and it was something that like we don't want to do as a regular ongoing thing. So it's like open submissions is a thing we're going to do again at some point.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be like, oh, we do this every year, because it is a monstrous amount of work. Like it's also that thing where open submissions was really great for us because we got more projects through than we thought we did, than we expected. So a lot more projects came. We ended up greenlighting more projects than we expected. But
what are some of the projects that got greenlit through it?
So like Space Battle Lunchtime was a project that came through. That's been published by Oni. We announced another project called Black Mage that's going to be coming out probably in 2019. That's still in development.
Yeah.
And I'm totally blanking on a couple of others.
I remember when you were telling me about Black Mage, and I was very hyped on that book. I want that book.
I've been looking at pages for like a bunch of the first issues, so
yeah,
you should be hyped on that book.
So Oni Press isn't having open submissions right now. How does someone go about like putting a pitch in front of an editor in a way that actually gets it looked at? Is there a good way to do that? Are like conventions the way to go? Are like, just like blind send it in? I don't know how to accurately. Is there even a foolproof way to like get an editor to actually look at a pitch?
I mean, there are ways of doing it, like in a actually, hang on 1 second. Let me back up. There's someone in the Twitch feed who's saying it's quite a time scale for pitches approved at Oni. I actually got it wrong. Open submissions, I think, closed in early 2016. So my time is all messed up. It's not that long.
Plus, to be fair, sometimes it takes time to make comics, and especially if it's like, for me, I do comics full time, and like I crank out a ton of work. I do like 4 or 5 books a month. But for somebody who is working a day job or like and has a family or something like that, they have to like chip away at it over time in order to get that book out. And you don't want to to be fair, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I'm saying that like you don't want a book to come out and then 4 months to go by and then the next issue comes out. Like,
correct.
I'm sure Oni Press, like, if they're in a situation like that, they want it all in the can so that they can just do a run of it,
Correct. And it gives you the time to send it out when like to like marketing and review copy so that people are seeing the whole thing. So like to give you an example, this project, that was approved back in 2016. Like, the time in between isn't because we've been sitting on it. It's been quite a bit of a process to sort of talk through like outline, and there's been notes passes on outline before script. I mean, it has been intensive. It's just all the stuff that no one outside.
Black Mage 2 is like these people's first comic, right?
Correct. Well, first is relative, but it's like the
first like monthly. How about that?
Correct. First monthly, first published through like a publisher like us of a certain scale.
Yeah.
And first issues are also hard because that's where you capture the most readers. So
God, tell me about it.
Nope, perfect. So it's less about us imposing this thing where like, oh, like we approved this thing and you're sitting on it. It's like, no. We've gone through like, I think like 8 to 10 drafts of outline, and before going through like, 6 to 8 drafts of scripts, and then going through like, initial thumbnails and then tweaking and then maybe retroactively changing some stuff in script. And, again, these are all conversations. These are not like these blind sort of like someone turns a thing in and then like you turn back and make these changes and then we're go.
Yeah.
And like with projects like the one we're talking about, there's a delicate thing that you're sort of trying to juggle where you want to do a fun comic that feels unique and special, and also trying to min-max the fun spectacle bits of the thing. Right. So it very much is that development process of taking projects from going to like, oh, this book is a solid B to like, okay, this needs to be like an A. And it's that extra 10% that is the hardest amount of work.
Oh, man. Tell me about it. I actually, on The Realm that I did with Jeremy Hahn, I feel like the first issue is on my end, the weakest issue, only because like it takes like, I don't know what I don't know until I get to issue 3. You know what I mean? Like, I need the space to experiment before I'm like, okay, the realm is this, you know?
Yeah,
As far as like color goes.
And making comics is like a living thing. It's like, you know, you can try to like treat these things like wind up toys and just sort of like put them out there, but the reality is that if you're making comics that are interesting at all, they are really kind of living creations that kind of tell you how they want to be made too.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure you like how you work on Heartthrob now that you're working on issue 5,
right? Yeah,
2, is different than what you went into it starting with.
Oh, for sure. And it's also changed a lot as we went, not only because of like me getting comfortable, but like Robert and I like working together better as we go. You know, like him giving me, like, I usually get the most notes on issue 1, and then and part of that too is because like I try to throw out as many ideas as possible in issue 1 just to see like what everyone is feeling and what they're not feeling. And then hopefully by issue 2, like most of the notes calm down. And then like, you know, we're on this is like issue 10 essentially.
Yeah. Like so much of the process of working in comics on a collaborative level is you're trying to establish a level of not only rapport, but also like you got to establish a level of trust.
Yeah.
And sometimes that just takes time and pages.
Yeah, for sure. Part of the reason why I feel like Cave Carson gels so well is because Mike and I have been working since like 2006, you know? Like if we just have a lot of pages under the belt and we know like what each other is capable of.
Yeah, and it's you have that comfort of you guys have done X number of issues, X number of pages.
Yeah.
And it's enough work where you can kind of get bored with each other's work. So to keep it fresh, you have to push the boundaries of what, you know, the art can look like.
Yeah.
And it's like Cave benefits from the time you guys have put in across all the stuff that you guys have worked on. I mean, like, you know, Cave looks insane, you know, and that's the thing where, you know, in a newer creative team that's not familiar with each other, like the choices you made as a colorist might not be as extreme, and his choices as an artist are probably not as.
I'm trying to get more and more.
He might not necessarily trust a colorist to be able to execute.
Yeah, I'm trying to get more and more extreme. Like, Heartthrob's not the place to be extreme, but you know, like experimental comics, I'm like, I don't know. I see stuff that like Mitch Gerardis is doing and Fiona Staples is doing, where they're blending. They're an artist and they're also a colorist, and the choices that they make and what they are and are not drawing, I think is like super interesting. And I'm trying to like port that over to coloring, like be as abusive with the line art as like it needs to be interesting. And I kind of feel like that's where comics is gonna. I feel like the most exciting space as far as visually in the next like 10 years. I don't know.
Yeah, it's there's so many more moves to be made creatively in comics and illustration. I don't know. It's like people aren't even really playing with the technology that we're capable of now. You know what I mean? Like digital coloring is kind of here, but like how many people are really playing with things like, well, what if we do like a fake offset thing like all the time?
Yeah.
And doing like really weird effects that blend what you can do in digital with printing processes, and like I don't know, it's you know.
So to loop around to pitches, is there like, are shows a good place to drop pitches off and stuff and that kind of thing? Like if I have like a pitch packet and I have like a little baby pitch like ready to go, and it's got like a little bit of art that my buddy did, and like I did some coloring in addition to writing it or something like that. And I have like 5 pages in like a 1 sheet, and I go down to Kinko's and I make like, you know, 15 copies, and I just drop them off at like you know, booths at a Comic-Con. Is that like a practical way to try to get started in comics?
Honestly, probably not. Like I feel like, you know, the comics industry has such a glut of content right now that editors and publishers are constantly looking for excuses not to take stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which is disheartening to hear if you're trying to pitch. Sure. But I think the things that are more important are getting the work out there in a way that's seen. So, I don't know, like I kind of feel like the idea of creating a pitch document and then putting it, sending it to an editor by leaving it behind at a booth, or like trying to track them down at a convention, is antiquated, right?
Is that, are we old? Did I get old?
We're super old because like what you should do instead is that like if you're gonna go all the way and make a pitch, it's not that much further for you to try and Kickstarter it or like do it as a webcomic.
Oh my god, I have so much to learn from Iron Spike.
Oh yeah, the $1 million Iron Spike Kickstarter record.
Yeah.
But like Spike is also like I don't know. It's the evolution of the comics market is like real fascinating because Spike can make a lot of money doing the kind of comics that they're doing, but that's not for everyone because if you're like probably me and you want to make comics. I don't think you want to deal with like shipment and fulfillment logistics.
Oh my god, dude!
Through a Kickstarter for 30 days.
I am struggling simply to run this channel in addition to coloring. Like I can't do shipment. I'm like, yeah, that's not in my wheelhouse. That's not in my future. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love getting the snide comment from time to time of like, if Kickstarter and Patreon is here, why are you guys even around in business? Like, you're useless. And it's like, well, I work for a print publisher, and we deal with logistics, and editors are there to help support you and be your greatest advocate in these projects.
Right.
Corey Cassoni is pointing out that the net on Kickstarter comics is much lower than a lot of people realize, which is true because once you pay out everything and fulfillment, and
I think really a lot of people who do their first Kickstarter don't realize exactly like how much everything is going to cost.
Yeah.
And so
I feel like if you're a hyper aware and effective creator who wants to make a living making comics while putting out good work, the smart money is like establishing deep relationships with publishers to put out the books that are right for print publishing, where the publisher can help support what you're doing, but also maybe flirting with a Kickstarter or Patreon here and there as appropriate. Because not every project needs to go through the same pipeline. Like, experiment on everything,
Yeah. I'm catching up on comments here in the chat. Hold on one second. The net on Kickstarters is lower. Yeah. Fake McCoy in the chat is a buddy I went to college with, and he said he made $100K on Kickstarter and still had to put up about $3K to make everything like work.
Yeah.
I feel like people, when they see how much comic books like physically cost, they don't really understand like why that is what it is. Like they expect comics to be cheaper because like a lot of other media is cheaper, but they don't realize like the logistics of doing a print run and doing shipping and doing returns and all that kind of stuff.
It's all the back end stuff that no one looks at as sexy.
Yeah.
And the brutal reality in comics in 2017 is that there's not a lot of money to be had in comics. Like our readership is not that great. The audience is there on the web and they are spending money, but again, it's all dispersed out in the ether because comics and Kickstarters and web comics and Patreons are all competing against video games, in-app purchases.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can't. How much can you really think about that stuff though? Because like, at the end of the day, like I have to make the best comic I can make, and like. I don't know. Maybe it's your job to think about that and not my job to think about that. Which is why I'm not thinking about that. But, I don't know.
Look, at the end of the day, I think the most effective way to pitch a comic to a publisher is to not pitch it to a publisher and sort of, like put it out there, show that you're good.
Yeah.
By hook or by crook. You know what I mean? Like,
so my advice...
is that thing where chasing a publisher in 2017 is doing it backwards. What you want is a publisher to chase you.
So my advice of like, how do I get this comic book made? Just make comics. Just shut up and start. Like, is actual advice?
Yeah, like it's legit on a certain level. I mean, again, I think there's a weird expectation in like, with younger creators who kind of don't understand what it means to be like a working professional in a creative industry that everyone's entitled to a shot. Yeah. That's not true. Like,
Yeah,
like you
I
are
know that's
not
not true.
entitled to a shot. You are not entitled to taking up someone's time and mental real estate because you suddenly think that someone out there needs to help workshop your career with you.
Yeah.
We don't have the bandwidth because the frank reality is that for me, in my as an editor, I was looking for projects that weren't people's first book. I was looking to work on people's second or third book where they figured it out as a creator. Like whether it is like they're a really good writer or artist, or they're really good at self-promotion and marketing, and like hopefully they're the total package.
Yeah. So if you're looking to get something made, and you're going to a con, dropping stuff off with an editorial booth is probably not your best bet. Should you just like?
Hang on, I have caveats upon caveats. Number one, if you're going to drop something off at a booth to chasing after a publisher, if that publisher has someone at the company who's familiar with you, then by all means, like if you struck up a conversation or a dialogue with that editor, then that's
mean, I've jokingly pitched a lot of things to you over the years. A lot of really terrible ideas that may or may not actually be terrible. I don't know yet. But
for a formal pitch for Jazz Robots.
I know. It'll happen. I just need, actual time to do it. But yeah, so I'm always a big advocate of like, if you're trying to break into comics, going to conventions and actually having like a human connection with the people around you in comics is better than ever showing your work at all. Like if people will look for your work if they want to look for your work, and you just make it available, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No,
would you say that's the same? It's the same kind of thing with pitching?
I think there's something to be said. Like someone in chat is saying, "Oh, that feels like to be entry level. It requires 4 years of experience." It's like, well, that's true. It is. There is no entry level comics creating. You know what I mean? Like again, these are items that are meant to be bought and sold. So like you're in a space of wanting to work with a publisher that wants to treat you as like prime time, right?
Yeah.
Which is to say like something that's going to be printed, distributed, and sold and marketed. And so it's that thing where if you're completely new to comics, showing that you can put the work and the time and the craft in and having it put out there, and exerting like a level of, oh no, we executed this project and it's amazing, is such a better calling card than anything else. Like no one wants to look at a half-assed sort of mini comic that feels very thrown together because someone thought, oh, I have 2 weeks till this convention comes up. And
that's the space I live in, man.
That is not a thing that's going to be sexy at all to any publisher.
Yeah, sure.
You want something that someone is like, oh man, I spent the last 2 years, I paid for an artist out of pocket because I really believe in this thing and I obsessed over this idea and this book is phenomenal. And then that's how you end up with like, and then they have like 4 publishers chasing after the rights on it.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm a big advocate of like, if you want something done right, like paying out of pocket is how you do it. A lot of colorists get asked to work to make someone's vision happen, and they don't even realize that like, everybody's got ideas, and the colorist is taking time out of their day, and like they could be working on the thing they want to work on. Yeah, taking money out of your own pocket and putting it up and making it happen is a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's weird. It's like I put a lot of truck into like, you deal with new creators who have some semblance of understanding, sort of basic social cues and just the idea of like working professionalism in a general way for comics. It's that like, if you understand that like every time you talk to an editor about taking a shot on you, they're not looking at like bringing you up out of the minor leagues to see what you got in like 5 years. They got one shot to see whether or not this book is going to work. That is straight up competing against Southern Bastards or Saw or Walking Dead or everything else that's in the marketplace right now. Not to mention the Marvel and DC shit. So like, if you're going to come at a publisher or an editor, you really got to knock it out of the park for them to want to work with you.
Which kind of blows me away, like how many people make these faux superhero comics, because like I don't know why you'd ever want to like roll up against like DC Metal right now. You know what I mean? Yep. Like every single superhero fan is going to buy DC Metal, and like no one is going to buy your weird like faux Batman Superman thing that's not Batman Superman but is Batman Superman.
No, it's in my more cynical moments I look at it as being a very sort of like the darker side of entitled fandom, thinking that, you know, I can do my original content and someone's gonna want to, you know, put it out there, and then like I just got to put it out there and be a huge success. It's like, it's not that simple. It really is not that simple.
Yeah,
like you have to be aware of the market. I mean, you know, and like on the publishing side for me at Oni, like I can always tell when those people aren't really like, you know, people are pitching us in a blind, cold pitch kind of way. You can always tell how unserious they are, because if you pitch something to Oni and you are completely unaware of our library or the books, that means you didn't even do the basic research of like trying to see if we'd actually be interested in this or if we would be able to sell it. And it means that like if you couldn't even do that sort of basic research, that means you're probably not even being that considerate with the work that you're doing.
Does that happen a lot? Where you get,
oh my god, that's like 99% of the cold pitches that we get. Yeah.
Wow. So to even just get in the 1% of pitches, you just have to do a Google search on the company.
You'd be surprised at how hard it is to get that baseline sort of professional behavior.
Oh my god. I'm glad that if I ever pitch, I will be in the 1%.
No, but like you can see how like on a certain level, sometimes like for me on the other side of this fence, it feels like I don't think it's hard to stand out. Like I really legit don't think it's hard to stand out. Like I'll give you a perfect example, right?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with a cartoonist by the name of Hannah Blumenreich?
No.
You should look her up. She's phenomenal. Okay. She's like someone who's been working on the web. She did these amazing Spider-Man comics that were totally like just fan stuff for like Tumblr.
Was it the fat Spider-Man?
No. It's just a normal. It was basically like a teen Spider-Man series of webcomics that like were him hanging around, walking a young kid home after he'd been bullied or something, and then sharing a sandwich with them.
Oh, or like, that's cool.
You know, it's like, you know, Spider-Man's had a hard day of fighting crime, and Aunt May catches him passed out asleep on the couch, and it's like, Yehudi or Super Mercado Comics in the chat just posted it. But like Hannah's a perfect example, right? So like Hannah did these Spidey comics that were done just as a fan, but they're amazing, and like, you know, they were able to flip that work into a short that was published by Marvel. You know, and I'm sure Hannah's someone that we've had conversations about on the creator-owned side. And, you know, who knows where that goes. But, like, that's a creator that put some work out there. It wasn't for, like, you know, profit or anything.
Yeah.
And it's just, you look at those comics and it's like, oh, yeah, they're ready to go. Let's see if there's something that fits.
Yeah. So do you think that if you're someone who's getting pitches rejected, it's not because you're like not in the right place at the right time or whatever? Like, it's if you're getting pitches consistently rejected, fundamentally there's something wrong with the pitches. Like
it's
in a way like wrong is a bit intense. What I mean to say is like, I talk about this when we talked about coloring. Like, there's a note that I always used to get when I was coming up where it's like, you're 90% there. And it's like, no notes, you're 90% there, just keep doing what you're doing. Where it's like tough to kind of like, you know, let someone know exactly what they need to do. They just need to do it kind of thing. They're just not quite there.
It's, you know, and again, this is like, if we're talking about pitches, most pitches that we see are more on the writing side of things than like writing and art side of things, right? So like on a certain level, writing portfolios for me as an editor have been simultaneously harder and easier to go through, because like they're easier in a, sometimes it's a very like thumbs up, thumbs down. It's like, oh, you're ready, or like, oh no, you're kind of not there at all yet. You need to draw way more. And then there's some people who are like close, and are sort of stagnating in a, oh, you're not spotting a lot of blacks, you have no sense of light or shadow, your anatomy is okay but not quite there, your sense of blocking is kind of terrible, you're breaking the 180 line all over the place. You know, or like you're a competent illustrator but you're terrible at making comics because you have no idea that lettering needs to go in your panels. So like there are a lot of things that people often need help with, but like on the writing side, it tends to come down to very simple things where like, number one, the concept is not that interesting.
Sure.
Number two, it could be, oh, we straight up have a project that conflicts conceptually.
Yeah.
You know? So like, you know, for example, like if someone
it couldn't even be that like the pitch is bad or whatever. It's just too similar to what's out there.
Yeah, and or even worse, like the thing that really sucks for people is that sometimes we turn down pitches because they're just not exciting to us in editorial. Like they're thoroughly competent, and that's not enough.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you want your editor, you want your publisher to be, you know, full-throated, 150% excited about a thing. You don't want them to be kind of tepidly like, oh, that's good enough.
Yeah, we have to make
no
like
project at Oni has ever been approved.
Does Oni ever?
And I was like, oh, it's good enough.
So this is something that like I don't know if this is true of publishers. I don't know if this is true of Oni in general, but like, do you have like an idea of like we're gonna do, you know, I don't know how many books you guys do a year, but do you have like a goal of books to hit for the year, and then when you're done, you're like you're not, you know, you're like, whatever, we're not going to pitch anything. And then do you ever have like a glut of pitches, or like
you are getting into the house cleaning side of things that we're sort of undergoing right now at Oni.
Oh, really?
Probably have too many projects on the docket, and a lot of like, you know, like Ari Yarwood, who's our managing editor, you know, has been you know, a lot of time and work in sort of wrangling out like our timelines for our calendar going through 2018 and 2019 at this point. And, you know, it's kind of hard because, like, I think, you know, people on the creator side of things have this natural inclination to want to make a comic and have it come out as soon as possible.
Sure.
But, like, you know, as a publisher, you can't do that because books are competing against not only what else is out in the marketplace, but also needing to have enough time to, you know, market and promote the books. And on top of that, it's like you also don't want those books to compete against what other launches are coming out of that same publisher as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So you never have like a goal like we need to approve 30 books, or we've only approved 20 and it's like middle of the year and we got to put more stuff out. Like there's never like a.
It's never been a time at Oni where we have said we don't have enough books. The larger challenge at Oni has always been that we have too many books.
Yeah, too many talented people.
They're all in progress in different stages and people work at different speeds. And so it's always that balancing act of, okay, these are books that need to be punted out a year, which always sucks to tell a creative team. But sometimes it you know, you have to do those things to sort of like make it work out for them. So like, but you're not doing that in a vacuum. It's like, okay, sorry guys, we can't put this out in the fall, but maybe we'll put it out next spring, like, you know, 8 months later. But the good news is that the reason why we're going to do that is because it gives us the ability to send out ARCs before we hit, say, ALA or BEA or like bookmark.
Oh my god, you just threw like so many letters at me. I didn't know what any of that meant.
So like ALA is the American Librarian Association.
Okay.
They do like 2 conferences a year. One's midwinter, one's the big show. And so basically it's where a bunch of librarians congregate. So you want to be marketing and promoting your middle reader and YA comics to them.
Okay.
You know, having them just hyper aware of everything that you're working on.
This is an entire market that I've never even like. I mean, I've been so focused through my career as far as like coloring for, which is weird because I don't even think I'm there yet as far as like coloring for Marvel and DC, you know, and like I have Marvel and DC projects, but a lot of the stuff I do is like on the fringes, and I think I fit best there on the fringes.
We're like, in this, like the comics industry is in this insane transition, right? So like our market is bifurcated.
Yeah.
Into these weird strata for readership and money, right?
Yeah.
So you have the direct market, which is like maybe like 2,000-3,000 stores.
Yeah.
That are taking the bulk of their money from like Marvel and DC titles, the odd Image creator-owned titles, and then there's the rest of us that are back of the catalog, like Oni, right? And so, you know, we're duking it out over like 3,000 retailers or whatever, and it's a lot, but not that much, right?
So you're talking about like when you Google comic book sales numbers, you end up on that site that's been tracking them since like 1995 or whatever. You're talking about that, right? Like that end of the industry?
Yeah, the direct market, the comic book market, right?
Yeah.
And like, you know, meanwhile, you have like book and library market where, like, to give you an example, I think the Texas library system is like 2,000 libraries.
Yeah. That's a lot of libraries.
That's a lot of libraries, right?
Yeah.
So the stat I was looking at, or it was talked about here in the office, was like we were talking about Raina Telgemeier, who is like the MVP of MVPs of everyone in comic books when it comes to straight up sales, right?
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed at how few people in the comics market that lives and dies reading like the Marvel DC titles has any awareness of this cartoonist, Raina, right?
I don't have any awareness.
You know who Raina Telgemeier is. She did Smile and Drama. She also did like the adaptations of the Babysitter's Club as graphic novel.
I mean, as in like I think I've seen these things across a room before, but not like I don't really know where that like.
It may not be your bread and butter as a comic.
Sure.
But so when people say that like creators like Raina are the future, I'm going to give you a stat that's gonna hurt your head a little bit, right?
Okay.
So Raina's initial print run for the first printing of her most recent graphic novel, Ghosts, was 500,000.
Oh my god!
Right.
That's like 90s numbers.
So this is a graphic novel.
Yeah.
And so that was the initial print run. So that's a book that is entirely geared towards like book and library market.
Yeah.
And she is, like they used to have the New York Times bestseller list for graphic novels. They canceled that, right?
Yeah.
Because she had 7 out of the 10
for
the last 4 years.
Right? They're like, why are we even keeping this list?
That is literally what happened.
Yeah.
And so Raina sold is like an initial print run of like 500,000.
Yeah.
How many copies do you think the comic book store market sold, the direct market sold?
I mean, maybe 1,000.
They sold like 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like it's that thing where like, there was a question on Twitter I saw today where people were like, who is this generation's Jack Kirby or whatever?
Yeah.
And my answer is like, oh no, it's Raina Telgemeier, but it's not like she's not Jack Kirby in the way that people want a Jack Kirby.
Right.
It's that she is like Michael Jackson during Thriller dominant in our industry, and most people are not aware of it.
So wait, who is our next Jack Kirby? How do I work with that guy?
I don't know, man.
Yeah, I
comics Jack Kirby.
I keep, because I've seen that question like float around as well, and I'm just like, I don't know, like comics like has exponentially grown in such an incredible way that like it's so many different things all at once now, and it's a really exciting time to be in comics, but like I don't think that we're ever going to have that ever again, where we have like one guy who's so prolific that he affects an entire universe of comics.
My biggest worry as someone who works in comics is that we are, as an industry, eating ourselves alive.
Yeah. Because
I think for all the innovation on creative that we, see on like the creator-owned side,
none
of us have worked all that hard to be that creative with distribution and sales. And marketing, right? And it's kind of like, how much have you seen publishers across the board work hard to try and expand the readership?
Yeah.
Like those efforts have been tepid at best.
Sure.
And it kind of sucks because it feels like we're supposedly in this creative renaissance, but like we're kind of eating our own tail because there's so many titles out there that are like competing for what are ostensibly the same number of readers.
Right. Yeah. For example, like I feel like Heartthrob, the book I'm working on right now, fits really well with like Wicked and Divine people and Paper Girls people. I think like that audience would really enjoy Heartthrob.
Yeah.
But like I don't know how to get them to try Heartthrob because they're already trying Wicked and Divine and Paper Girls. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I don't know how to add a third comic onto someone who only buys, like, goes into the store occasionally.
My worry is that we've taught the readership in a way we've taught them how to consume comics, right?
Yeah.
On a business level. And again, I'm couching this conversation in basically being about the direct market, like the comic book store market, right? Because I think book and library is where the real money is, and eventually the sort of like, that is your end goal. That is where you want to be. It's just, for those of us who are specifically...
I gotta open up that cash money-making library to get in on this.
Nick, at some point you're going to end up working on like an 80-page kids graphic novel, and it's going to be the biggest paycheck you've ever got.
Oh man, I want that. I'm ready. I actually part of the problem that I have is like I go to shows and everything I work on is like unequivocally not for kids, but it's, since I'm a colorist, it's all bright. So kids are like, "Oh, let me check this out. Let me touch this." And I'm like, "Please go away. Please go away." You know, like get away from the table.
No, it's that thing where the comics market, because of the monthly format, because we're constantly talking about #1 issues, because we're constantly talking about new titles and new creator owned, we're an industry and a readership that is entirely about what's new, and we're never about narratives and talking about like where a story is, where it currently sits, and when stories end and how they ended. You know,
just recently I was talking to my local comic book shop guy, and he was talking to me about how he really loved Sheriff of Babylon, and he got like 7 of the first issue, 4 of the second, and 1 of the third, because he just like couldn't move it. Like, people buy a couple first issues and that's it, you know?
We've taught the audience to not have an attention span to follow through on narrative.
Yeah.
So like you have this weird thing where people want to trade weight by nature, but the audience isn't big enough to support that sort of thinking. So like you can't support comics. Comics are not sustainable with page rates when your first volume trade sales are low enough that by the time you get to volume 2, assuming you have a natural attrition of like 50 to 70%, like no book can survive that unless you have saga numbers or have a TV show backing you.
Right. Which, by the way,
is where your pal Charlie now fits in.
yeah, and where Heartthrob also fits in. We got a little heat, we got a little buzz, little TV buzz.
Bit of heat, knock on wood. That'll happen.
I mean, hopefully everything pans out. But we got a little bit of heat, and if people want to get in on the ground floor of Heartthrob, they should pick up Heartthrob.
Yeah, which Nick is spoilering the hell out of by even like coloring these pages on a stream. This is like the final issue of the 2nd season.
Okay, but it's page 1 and 2. Like there's not, and to be fair, a lot of this book is woven together in the dialogue. Like this book doesn't really come together until it's all married, you know? Yeah. And you read the actual issue. If I had the script on screen, then we'd have a problem. Yeah. So, but I especially if I was looking at the last page of this issue, because it's a pretty awesome cliffhanger. But we won't get into that.
It's so good. It's so good. I was telling someone kind of abstractly about it when like just the script for 5 came in. Yeah. And it's they were their eyeballs turned into like dinner plates about the finale. Because the cool thing about Heartthrob is that you can see the obvious way this story goes.
Right.
It's like here's Bonnie and Clyde with like a Fight Club hook to it. Yeah. But like again, this book lives and dies in execution, and I think the challenge is that we sometimes have in marketing and promoting a book like this is that you're supposed to read this book. This isn't a thing where you read the first volume and you're like, oh, I get it. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you don't get it. This is like, there's so much more to this that is all about actually reading the book.
I also found, I don't know if you think about this, but when I try to market this book, it's difficult to market in a space of like Twitter and Instagram, because I feel like the love and care that a reader is going to have with this book comes from actually reading the comic book, actually reading the whole thing all the way through. Like, I can spoil some pages or some panels that are, like Robert does a great job, but it's like kind of similar through, you know what I mean? Like it's
you are doing a character driven thing that is rooted in conversation and like, these people looking at each other and committing crimes and falling in love.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's like,
and it's all going horribly wrong.
Right, yeah. And it's like this toxic, terrible thing. And it's tough to I don't know, convey that over Twitter and Instagram. Do you...
No, it's the challenge of like I look at it like this, okay? We are doing what and again, I'm obviously biased as the former editor on this book that is now being edited by our partner in crime, Desiree Wilson.
Yeah.
It's like, this book is like a great HBO series.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like, can you imagine someone trying to do The Wire as a comic book? You know what I mean? Like,
right, it'd be terrible.
And like,
it'd be tough to market.
And this book has like different layers to it that make it work as a comic, but it's like, it's difficult because like this book requires you to be smart and with it and kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so like sometimes it's, if the bulk of the readership's context for what comics are is superheroes or like aggressive genre fiction, what we're sort of doing here is a little bit more, intellectually mature and a little bit more, I don't know, it just requires you to be a little more with it, on a certain level.
Yeah. Which is why we're going to make that sweet library money, right, Charlie?
Exactly.
All right, man. Well, I've kept you for a while, for over an hour now. So
that's okay. No, you're good. I do have to go do the most exciting of things, which is I have to go pick up my toddler from daycare.
Yeah. We all have lives to lead. But thank you for coming by and talking about pitches, and be sure to not send your pitches to Charlie and not drop them off at Oni press booths, and just get your Kickstarter.
I think you have a Moneyball project that has an awesome artist that will sell itself off the page. By all means, drop it off.
But everybody thinks that.
Hilariously, that has happened, I think, one time in the history of Oni. Like, James Lucas Jones tells this great story about that happening once. And that artist was Tyler Crook.
Oh yeah,
who illustrated Petrograd for Oni, and then went on to win like the Russ Manning Award, which is essentially like the Eisner Best Newcomer Award.
Yeah,
and he's now currently like drawing and painting Harrow County.
Yeah, Harrow County is beautiful.
Oh, it's a gorgeous book. Tyler is the businessman. That guy's the best.
Yeah, well, if you're Tyler out there, if you're also a Tyler out there, then I guess you can drop off a pitch.
Yeah, there you go. You have to be as good as Tyler Crook.
That's a tall order.
That is a tall order.
Well, yeah, thank you for coming by. We're gonna cut the stream here as well. The page kind of maybe got a little away from me while we were talking. It might not look like this totally in print. Because it's kind of got to match the second page coming up. I might make the second page match the first page or vice versa. I don't really know. The street scene is a tough panel to work on. So that's definitely going to get tweaked.
This is such an easy book for you to color, considering it's mostly conversations and furtive glances.
Yeah, but then like, okay, so like, yeah, this scene
and crazy board game layouts.
This scene is super easy, but like this panel to get the shot of her looking over the balcony, have the ambient color, and then also like create the depth where like the buildings are so narrow that like I can't really make the top of the building dark and the bottom of it light because the buildings are so narrow is going to be super fucking tricky. So, look for it when it comes out in print. I don't know what it's gonna look like, but it's not gonna stay like this.
I love it.
We're gonna be doing I don't know what we're gonna be doing for our next stream. Something arty in the next probably Wednesday or Thursday. So if you like what you're seeing, subscribe. Or at least follow. Follow's free. Subscribe if you really dig it. If you're watching this on YouTube. And you have Twitch Prime, you can also Amazon Prime, you can subscribe for free for a month. You can also, if you're a subscriber, I set up a Discord that's going on. If you're a subscriber, you can submit a portfolio for review, and we'll review it on stream. If you and then you will also get a little bit of say in like whatever I'm streaming, Like if you want me to color some of your work or some other work in the future, you can, throw your suggestion in, and I will take it under advisement. Yeah, so I think we're gonna wrap it up now. Charlie, do you have any parting words or anything that you want to promote before we go? What was your favorite project to work on at Oni?
I mean, obviously it's Heartthrob.
That's what I like to hear. Do you have anything else that Oni's coming out with in the next, like, I don't know if you know offhand what's coming out in the new comic book day this Wednesday?
Oh, we have like so many ridiculous books coming out. Like,
yeah, I know Dead of Winter is one that I'm reading that I really like.
Dead of Winter, which is like a weird goofball project because it's like, hey, look, let's we Oni publishes comics based on Rick and Morty and Invader Zim. What's our next license project? A book based on a board game. Yeah, but it's an awesome board game.
Yeah.
Dead of Winter is incredible. It is a weird book that most people kind of don't get because they're like, it's based on a board game. But don't be fooled. It is one of the best zombie books out there. I mean, it is. If you like Walking Dead, but wanted more humor and weirdness and goofiness, like Dead of Winter is kind of perfect because the short pitch on that comic is it's a zombie apocalypse kind of 4-issue miniseries that we did, starring a golden retriever named Sparky. Yeah. And Sparky in the board game is like the most overpowered character ever, and our comic reflects that too. And so it's like illustrated by Gabo, who previously did The Life After at Oni, and written by Kyle Starks, who's also our main series writer on Rick and Morty, as well as doing as well as the cartoonist behind Kill Them All, which also just came out in full color as a graphic novel from Oni.
Yeah.
And he also previously did Sex Castle, which was published by Image, and he's also doing Rocky Mountain. Anyway, so Kyle is funny as shit.
Yeah.
And so Kyle doing a zombie comedy thing that is sort of, I don't know, Air Bud meets Shaun of the Dead.
I pick up everything Kyle does. The guy's brilliant.
The guy is amazing. But like, I've been spoiled at Oni. I mean, like, I'm transitioning at an editorial, and I've had a pretty awesome run, like getting to work on titles like Heartthrob and Dead of Winter, but also like, Kaiju Max by Xander Cannon is like the craziest book ever.
Yeah.
And then the Cullen and Brian, who I got to edit on The Sixth Gun, are also doing The Damned at Oni right now, which is also amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's like Miller's Crossing meets Hellboy, which is the best thing ever.
Wait, did The Damned, was that put out by somebody else first?
No, it was published in black and white by Oni back in like 2006.
Oh, right? Okay. Yeah, because
and then they did about 8 issues, and then they started The Sixth Gun with the idea of switch hitting between the two.
Oh, okay.
And then NBC picked up The Sixth Gun to be a TV show, and it went to pilot but didn't get picked up. But like in the whole process, like flirting with a TV show, like they kind of went all in on Sixth Gun. So now that Sixth Gun is done, they're going back to The Damned.
I wasn't quick enough to jump on the Sixth Gun board game and get all the miniatures, and I regret that every day.
You may know someone who can hook you up.
Yeah? Oh, yeah. I love it. The stream is fruitful. Well, thanks for coming by, everyone. Is there anything else you want to promote? Anything else that Oni's doing?
If you like Scott Pilgrim, there's a brand spanking new Scott Pilgrim card game.
There you go. We love card games on the stream.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thanks for everyone that came by. I hope this was informative and informed your pitches going forward, and you guys are gonna crush it on Kickstarters. And if you're the next Tyler Crook out there, just show up. Just show up. Yeah. What are you doing?
Feel free to yell at me if you have questions on Twitter. At least I can answer as best as I can. I'm at Charlie Chu.
There you go. So yeah, Charlie's available if you got questions. I'm always here for you. I'm here for you. And if you have questions about color, if you have questions about comics, when we do portfolio reviews, it doesn't matter what it is. I went to art school. I know all the lingo. I can point you in the right direction.
Nick, have you done a stream talking about Helheim yet?
No, I haven't. Are we going to... Do you want to talk about Helheim right now?
What I want to do is I want to show off pages from Helheim, because the thing you did where you did like these night to day transitions across scenes is wild to me.
Yeah, I
feel like you never get your due as a colorist, as a guy who thinks about pages beyond
real quick.
Just a page.
Real quick, I just want to talk about Helheim for 1 second. Because Helheim actually means a lot to me as a colorist, and also like where I was at in life. And I don't know if I've told you this before, but like when I was picked up on Helheim in 2014, like I was kind of a little bit stagnant, and Ivan Brandon kicked my butt to be like, dude, Wilson's killing it out here. I know you're capable of doing this. Like, why aren't you doing this? And we had gotten like maybe 3 or 4 issues into Helheim, and I was like, yeah, I got to step up. I really got to step up. And I feel like I grew a lot over the course of Helheim in the first trade. And then I brought everything that I like, the fire that was like lit under me, like while the first trade was happening, to the second trade. And if you're reading this, if you're ever reading the second trade, I go from issue to issue around the color wheel to get to the climax of, you know, Ricard meeting the Valkyrie for the first time, and then like brawling.
You need to do a stream talking about Helheim with like another colorist on.
Yeah, it's a like, it was a monster of a book, and the only reason I did it was because I probably haven't told you this either, but like I read Cullen's run on Magneto, and I realized that he was paced, and like, you know, if you're starting to do color and stuff like that, you don't necessarily have to, this is like fucking crazy, like I'm a maniac and I've just worked on 1 million comics for my entire life and now I'm gonna try some shit out. But like, I had noticed that his pacing was so slow. You know, like Heartthrob isn't like that. Heartthrob has like a scene change, like sometimes every frame. Yeah, like Heartthrob bounces around so much that I need to use the whole palette to make it cohesive. When Cullen writes something, he has maybe a scene change in like a whole 20 pages, you know, maybe 2. And so I realized that since he was moving so slowly, I could also move that slowly. And I could also like journey around the color wheel in a way that reflects what he's writing, which makes me want to work with Cullen again. And you know, we're gonna do a thing.
Yeah, like Helheim benefits from being like a very dark fantasy series that's hyper glib.
Yeah.
At atmospheric as hell. Like it's that thing where like you say it's slow, and like that's not to say that like it's slow in a it's like boring.
It's slow in the mechanics of scene change. It's not slow in that, oh my god, there's a monster coming up the hell right now, you know?
Yeah, it's like every scene feels like it's like something that exists in like a Frazetta painting or something.
Yeah. It's like it feels to me, I always think about this when I was working on it. It feels like in X-Files when you know they're in the dungeon of like whatever fucking thing they're like trying to find, like in the nest of the thing, and it's just and like in X-Files they didn't really like have the they were like building suspense as they go, so it was like, you know, the thing jumps out, it scurries away, they're like darting all over the place, and it's like exciting to watch, but it's all set, like the last like 20 minutes is all set in like this thing, you know, in one location, and like, and Helheim feels like that to me. And I think
you're soaking in the atmosphere.
Right, exactly. And Cullen, I feel like he's a writer that, like, I've worked with him, and then I work with, you know, Bendis on Powers, and it's like the opposite. Like, you know, there's so much going on, and Chris Sabella on Heartthrob. Like, there's so much going on all the time. Like scene change, that I was like in that mindset when I started Helheim, and then once I got comfortable with Cullen, I was like, oh, I get how this is now, and I brought it to Drew Moss's book, which name is escaping me.
Oh, Blood
Feud.
Blood Feud.
Yeah, same thing. Like I was like starting to do like limited palette stuff because I was like, you know, I'm actually able to do that for this book, you know. I can actually use that quiver or that arrow in my quiver when I like normally can't, because something is going to need like the full range of the palette.
I love it when you talk colors, Nick. It's so good. It's so thoughtful. I know.
There's a lot of stuff. There's far more to think about in color in the scope of a run than like one single issue. I was actually having a conversation with Matt Wilson about this because I was talking to him about his Cap run that he's working on right now, Captain America, and I was asking if he's like pulling back on blues and reds to make Cap pop as he goes, and he was like, yeah, hell yeah, man. Like, you know, when Cap shows up, you should know it, and that's how you do it. It's little things like that like the reader doesn't necessarily pick up.
Yeah, but it's that thing where like you are actively engaged as a colorist in the thinking about things and approaching it from storytelling, which is how everyone should be making comics. It's not about just showing off about like, you know, here's a bag of tricks on this page.
Right.
It's looking at it as a cohesive whole.
Yeah. At any rate, go pick up Helheim, go pick up Heartthrob, go pick up Dead of Winter, go pick up, I don't know, just go to the shop.
I think Yehudi Mercado and his upcoming Sci-Fu comic.
Yeah, oh God. Yeah, there's so many things to promote. You're probably sick of us by now. We're gonna cut the stream. Thank you, Charlie, for coming by and talking about pitches. We'll see you later, guys.